Greetings and welcome to the 7th Movie Night Extravaganza invasion of the This Is Revolution podcast. My name is Forrest Miller, the host of Movie Night Extravaganza. Tonight we will be talking about Akira Kurosawa's 1985 samurai epic Varn. This movie was drawn out by Kurosawa over the course of 10 years while he went blind. It is very loosely based on Shakespeare's King Lear, and it is a sprawling, almost 3-hour medieval epic. Now, before I bring in my panelists this evening, I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to both This Is Revolution and my channel, Movie Night Extravaganza. You can also support Movie Night Extravaganza on Patreon, where you get access to all kinds of amazing discussions and interviews. Not so much lately, but we're trying to build up it so we can afford to do that. But links are in the description. So without further ado, let's bring in the crew. I am first joined by J. Andrew World, the artist for Ben Burgess's Give Them All. The co-host of Bad Takes and Movie Night Extravaganza, as well as freelance artist for graphic novels and book covers. I am also joined by C. Derek Varn, the host of VarnVlog, as well as co-hosting daily materials of This Revolution and Murder Science. How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. I just want to, first of all, shout out. Today is my sister's birthday, so happy birthday, Leanna.
Round of applause all around. Yeah, so we should probably kick it to the trailer first.
Man, people are crazy for that trailer.
It's just my luck. It's taking forever to play. I'm literally. It's not. I don't know what's going on.
Wait, it's not working on.
It's just my. It's. Oh, here it is. Everything wants to be difficult.
Yo, that was a good trailer, honestly. That got me pumped.
Yeah. I remember growing up, and I don't know if Varn might remember this too, but the local PBS station in Atlanta ran in like 1986, 87, something like that. And I remember they played this amazing commercial, and I like so wanted to watch it, but my parents wouldn't let me. And I could have swore the people in black in the movie were ninjas. That's what I thought, anyways. But what do I know? I was like 10.
It's rated R, right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
the
I mean,
the full version I think maybe even be rated NC-17. So,
yeah, and it's a sprawling 2 hours, and it's a cool 2 hours and 40 minutes. Worth every minute of that. But like, I had to watch it in 2 parts. To like, I don't know, like my ADHD is just bad. But last night I made it through, and you know, I'm another 5 years older at this point, but it was good as hell.
Yeah. I kept pausing it too because I was also like double checking things, making notes. Like, wait, what does that color mean in Japan? And oh wait, yeah, let me look this up. So it did take me 2 nights as well to get through the movie, but it is worth it.
I have 11 pages of notes that I wrote down.
So yeah, this is one of my 4 favorite movies as explained on Letterboxd. And so this is probably my 20th time through this thing, and it's still not slow, but it's long.
Yeah.
I mean, my other favorite movies tend to be like Tarkovsky movies, so this actually is kind of an easier watch. But I love Kurosawa. I think when we first talked about this, we talked about doing Rashomon, but I'm actually glad you brought me on for Ron, because I think Ron is the best as far as easily accessible Kurosawa movies. As far as particularly because you see what he does with color. The other really high point, samurai epics, and both the other Shakespeare adaptations are from the 60s, so they're in black and white, and they're stunning too, but in a completely different way. This movie is just something else.
Yeah, I've seen Rashomon, I've seen Seven Samurai. I was in college when I saw both of those. Like, I was a freshman in college, and I took like a world cinema class, so I definitely wasn't paying attention to like the extent that I wish I was, but I liked both of them. It does, the color makes it a lot easier, I think, to watch through. And I don't say that as someone who like I like black and white movies a lot, but black and white and subtitled is kind of a little
it's
bit
kind of a big black and white subtitled and long. Like,
yeah, because Seven Samurai is almost as long as this, and it's completely in black and white, and it is a. I remember in college one night we decided to have a movie marathon, and that was the movie we picked, which was a mistake because everybody but me was asleep, and I'm like jumping up and down on the couch, going like, "Samurais are killing each other," and everybody else.
So another thing I wanted to talk about before I downloaded the color video that you wanted to talk about, Andy. But one thing to talk about before that is the last movie that we did on Movie Night Extravaganza was Mishima, and I find it like the ideological differences between like a character like Kurosawa, who is 100% a pacifist at a time when that's definitely not the most popular position. By the time this movie came out, he felt like Japanese society had kind of far surpassed him. Like, he felt like he was kind of a conservative relic of a different time. And, it was definitely accentuated by the fact that he really couldn't get movies made at this point. Like, it's late in his career, and he wants to make this sprawling, 2 hour and 40 minute long, like $19 million epic, which is not something that Japanese, producers were willing to do whatsoever. So he ends up having to go kind of meet a French producer, and that's why like the beginning titles are in French. I find it really interesting though, just juxtaposing this movie with watching Mishima twice last week, which I mean is a Paul Schrader movie, but is based on Japanese society in the same period, and someone who is incredibly fucking fascist, kind of in their politics and in their worldview, fascist and schizophrenic, which is never a good mix.
Fascist, schizophrenic, and a not closeted homosexual at the time, with that totally wasn't okay. I mean, like, Mishima is a wild, fascinating figure, but the opposite of Kurosawa, and just as marginalized, actually. So I mean, it's interesting because they both felt like relics, and but
and I think kind of were. I mean, Kurosawa was obviously a lot, is kind of fascinated with Western culture in a lot of ways. Like, he liked the samurai epic, he liked that as a genre, but that's not where he wanted society to go back to. Which, I mean, Mishima was literally like, "Oh, we should bring samurai back." So that's not what he's, what Kurosawa was saying in this movie whatsoever. In fact, it's a poignant anti-war, about the futility and pointlessness of war, to the point where it's three brothers who there's really no reason for them to be fighting whatsoever, besides lust for territory, and that's the way that they were raised, and
and manipulation from Lady Kade. But even Lady Kade is presented as she has a legitimate reason for what she's doing, given what happened to her family. It is a very long and slow form of revenge. So I think this movie is great like that. I am gonna probably get all weirdly break out the Buddhist knowledge, because it helps to understand this movie, actually, to know some stuff about Buddhism.
Yeah, absolutely. I shared some stuff in the chat we had before this, in case I know Forrest is not necessarily an expert on Buddhism. I didn't know about you.
I used to be a monk. All right.
I spent a week once hanging out with
you're just gonna drop that information and then just
a little more than me.
I used to be a Shramana, which is a first stage 4-vow monk, but that includes celibacy. I gave my vows back after 3 months, but and not in Japanese Buddhism. It was in Theravada Buddhism, but I know a lot about Buddhism. And there's a lot of most of this epic. I mean, there's some other stuff in it too, because it's based off Lear, but it's also based off of this quasi-historical Japanese source material and a real historical figure, which is also kind of wild. And the story is given its structure from Lear. And then there's all kinds of Pure Land and Nichiren Buddhist references throughout it too. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense, because in Japanese society, to really put it simply, you're born you're born I forgot the one religion there, but you die a Buddhist, because the one religion is about the living, and Buddhism is about preparing yourself for the afterlife, which is a perfect religion to be looking at for a film such as this, as opposed to Miyazaki, who looks at the other one, which I'm so embarrassed I'm blanking on right now. I'm looking it up now. Shinto, yeah. Yes.
This chat's keeping up with us, definitely, right now.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I have the Shinto Buddhism clip for the after. I'll play that in the after thing, where you kind of have the explainer clip for that. But yeah, I want to touch on the art in this, though, I think, before we really get too deep into the Buddhism stuff. And
absolutely.
And that's the reason that we kind of picked this this movie. I mean, you picked this movie, Andy. And so yeah, Jason, there's the color. I think it's the second one, the color clip. So yeah, I think that's a really good explainer.
Yeah, and Kurosawa also invented bisexual lighting. But
I was
one
gonna
thing I
go to
did want
I was gonna go to a Euphoria drag show the other night. I ended up just passing out because I had worked in the afternoon, but I was gonna go and be like and start asking like my friends that are drag queens about bisexual lighting and be like, I need to know more about this.
Well, one thing I did want to actually kind of correct a little bit from the video, because like the colors have very very specific meanings too, because like yellow in Western Japan also means treachery, and Taro, the eldest son, was wearing yellow. But I do think they got the red right in that, which violence and rage and emotion and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
the
it's
blue,
splashed really
which they
across this movie like a Jackson Pollock painting. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. And then the blue, which they didn't mention, means fealty in parts of Japan. So it's kind of interesting that's what each son wore, and the youngest was in blue, and he's the one who showed fealty to his father.
yeah, I actually wondered about that watching that video last night, and I was like, damn, they don't touch on the blue part of it. So that makes a lot of sense.
I got in my notes, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all three sons obviously are in the bright primary colors from the very start, right? Like, Taro is wearing the yellow, and then Gyro, who you don't expect at the beginning whatsoever to be the most violent and treacherous son. He kind of seems like the one that's kind of just going along to get along. Even in the first scene is in the bright red. And then obviously Saburo, who's the third son that gets banished very early on. He's the Forrest character in the Give Them an Argument universe.
Also has the best pizza, right?
No, he's wearing the blue, and
yes.
The teal actually is my favorite color of light blue, teal. But,
and then the two other armies, just to mention them, they the one that Saburo marries the father of is white, and then the other army of the former rivals of this warlord is in black. So clearly which people are which whenever you're watching this, which is like you don't get that in say like Lord of the Rings, where you're watching like everybody fight in the rain. It's like I don't know where the orcs begin and the elves end. But this one, who's what.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that with, something like Seven Samurai, too, where, you're having to pay attention to a black and white movie where all of the characters are speaking in subtitles and there's fighting going. Like, it's hard to keep track of characters. In this movie, it's not. In this movie, very much who each character is because they are clad in the color that you're supposed to be keeping track of. And there's so many fucking characters that it works very well.
Yeah. Agreed. So there's a lot of characters. There's in this one.
It becomes the most accessible. Like you're right, though, Varn. It becomes the most accessible Kurosawa movie.
Yeah, and the amount of characters is like many Kurosawa films, because he stacks these films with just. I mean, Seven Samurai's got 7 good guys, and that's before you get to the bad guys and the villagers and all the other characters.
But Varn, sorry, I cut you off.
No. I think the setup is also very clear from the beginning. You have the color associations. Although I will say white and black have different meanings in Japanese culture than they do in ours. So
yeah, but honestly, they didn't really mean much for the movie, so I didn't really.
No, I don't think they're chosen symbolically. I think it's just so you can tell the characters apart.
Agreed.
I think it's fascinating how much comes from Lear, though, because we also immediately, like, if you know the source, the Shakespeare source material, we also know their correlates immediately too. Like Saburo is Cordelia, we know that, like, etc. and so forth. I think also what's interesting is like we say this movie is the most accessible. I kind of agree with you, and Tom's like following what's going on. Acting wise, though, it's kind of not, because a lot of the characters are acting naturalistically, but not all of them. Some of them are using no play signification and movements and stuff like that, and it's intermixed, which is, I mean, particularly with Lady Kata, is one of those things where I'm like, And then you also have the exaggerated like fool character who's awesome, but is pulling from both like Japanese tradition and from the Western fool tradition. So it's
but
there's all this stuff going on.
I think that it's fascinating that it is based on King Lear, because there is that kind of prophetic character, I think, going all the way back to also like Greek tragedy too, like on top of Shakespeare, where this kind of prophetic character is always kind of speaking in like almost riddles that you realize correlate to like things that are going to happen later on in the movie, and they're kind of they're kind of a prophetic force, I think. And the fool sometimes is that, but like at other times seems to be just responding like it's like a weird like dynamic where it's a fool that's finally free. And I kind of find that fascinating, because like what is a fool that's kind of finally free going to really do? And
become Weird Al.
Maybe. But like I don't know, I found that part of it fascinating. I don't think really in Shakespeare they ever touch on like I don't think Shakespeare ever really, because I think the archetypes get more play here because it's a 3-hour movie, which I find really interesting.
Well, I would say in the speaking truth to the king role of the fool is in Shakespeare. The prophetic stuff is not as much. What I also find interesting, just to compare it to the other two Kurosawa Shakespeare movies, which are, like I said, there's the famous one, Throne of Blood, and then there's The Bad Sleep Well, which is Hamlet, which I think is not as well known. It doesn't have a Criterion edition, for example.
It's also set in then modern times. It's
right?
like 1940s, 1950s, somewhere in there.
Right.
It doesn't have a Criterion release, though. Did it even really happen?
Well, I mean, Rand doesn't either, but
Rand does have a Criterion release. It's just not on the Criterion channel, which is interesting. They do have a
I don't think they still have rights to it, because I think they lost it for the 4K, just to get super nerdy about it. But to get The Bad Sleep Well is kind of interesting, but Throne of Blood actually is, you would think it would be very similar to this, because it's Macbeth samurai, right? But the poetry stripped out of Throne of Blood, at least in its translation in English. I don't speak Japanese. It might actually be in the Japanese, but whoever translated the subtitles, it reads very prosaically.
Also, like Japanese language is naturally more poetic than English. So there's that, but that's just Japanese language.
Right.
By the way, I should say the Criterion's out of print, I guess. So you're right about that.
Right. Yeah. But this movie, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better people translating the subtitles. I don't know. The poetry's still there, and it's clear in the subtitles.
Yeah.
And that's not true for Throne of Blood. I actually would need a Japanese native speaker to like tell me if it's just bad subtitle translation. But it does seem like the interest is different in what he's doing here. Whereas in Throne of Blood, it's very direct. While the violence happens off excuses the 50s, it's a very direct sort of movie. There's so much metaphor and poetry and stuff going on in this that it's wildly different.
Also, with Throne of Blood, they shoot live arrows at Toshiro Mifume's head, which is amazing. like if one reason to watch the movie is just for that.
One thing I want to point out is the fool sings that song that like turns Hidedora and Taro against each other, kind of, and the poetry really does stay within it. See the Lord, Gordon the wind, swinging this way, swinging that way, spinning as the breeze blows, dangling hollow from the tower. Like that maintains the rhythmic cadence, I think, almost within being like translated from, being translated from Japanese, but also like being translated into a form where like it still maintains that structure to it.
Yeah, and interesting too, like Peter, the actor who played the character, has a gorgeous singing voice and doesn't use it in this movie. all the songs are kind of more sung traditionally, which is a little more guttural than the beautiful like Sinatra-esque jazz he did as pop music back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
We have some English fans in the chat saying, "How is Japanese inherently more poetic than English? That seems impossible to actually quantify." Fans of English,
It is more concise than English, in that it uses particle construction. But I say that as if I know. I just know because I kind of speak Korean. So which is maybe a related language, maybe. But they use the same. The sentence construction is very similar. That I do know. So to not get totally off topic. So what do we think about this first scene? You start off in this dry, like picturesque camp. We have the scene. It's analogous to the "Who Loves Me the Most" scene in Lear, although it's not exactly the same. And you have Saburo, very like is always punking his father kind of, but also you see immediately when his father falls asleep, he goes and takes his sword and cuts down a branch of a tree, branch of bamboo to make shade. And then when they get back together, he also, his father's making, frankly, literally, I mean, like in the Japanese context, it's not fascist, but it's literally a fascist point. The whole like one stick breaks, a bunch of sticks don't break, and so
it's literally 3 arrows. Like it's the anti-communist German
right, right. And Saburo just goes, "Okay, I can't do it, just my hands, knee." And everyone takes it as totally insubordination, but he is kind of making a point about his brothers without saying so.
Yeah,
like they're not gonna be unified. It won't take much to disunify them.
And he says it in like an incredibly interesting way, I think, because I mean, in this movie, I think truth turns out to always be prophetic, right? Like it turns out to be that people can see ahead to what's really going to happen. And he says, "What kind of world do we live in? One barren of loyalty and feeling. You spilled measureless blood. You showed no mercy, no pity. We too are children of this age, weaned on strife and chaos. We are your sons, yet you count on our fidelity. In my eyes, that makes you a fool." And it becomes prophetic because, as much as in that first scene when you don't know the characters at all, like it's like, oh, this guy is kind of just being fucking wise ass, like, fucking with his dad. And like you can think about like kind of and we talked about this kind of with Mishima, like the Confucian tradition within Japan, which obviously is not as overwhelming as it was within Chinese culture, but like is still there, where there are clear hierarchies where like your father makes a decision, you're kind of expected to take care of your father, which they immediately fuck over. Like he immediately is like, "Hey dad, I'm kicking you out of the fucking castle. Like, you got to sign a deal. There's almost like a very Western capitalist way of dealing with your dad too. You're like, "Hey dad, you need to sign this new agreement, this contract, and like get the fuck out."
Looking forward to John Jr. doing that to his dad.
But like he does. So it's like Saburo immediately does see the fact that these are 3 violent warlord brothers. Like there's no way that they're just going to be like, "Oh, we should support the oldest brother." And that's going to be like the way things go. And Jiro, who ends up being like the character that, fucks over his brother as immediately, kind of is the first one to be like, yeah, dad, I respect you too. I love this. This is going to work. This is going to be great. So it's an interesting scene. And I think you see everything that you need to out of these characters almost immediately.
Yeah. I think it's interesting also that he chose characters that are clear analogies to an actual historical figure. The historical figure is Motonari, so it's not, the name used is not the one that would have actually that was used, because I think Kurosawa is fictionalizing them so much that through use of Lear that it's divorced from that. But the warlord context, I think, is important because that's not really in Lear in the same way. like, you know, in Lear, you're dealing with a mythical king, but one in a not very contested environment who's setting up a highly unstable, you know, inheritance situation with daughters. In this scenario, you know, the Lord is not a king; he's a warlord, and he's a lord because he, you know, is able to kill enough people to do so. And
constantly over the course of fucking 70 years.
right,
He was able to kill enough people to do so.
right, and so, you know, one of the things I think Kurosawa is implanting is this has bled into his family life in a way that he can't get away from, even though there are multiple good characters. I mean, it's not just Saburo. In fact, Saburo is not the goodest, to use the most good character. It's actually later Sue, who is a character whose face you don't ever even see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also on that scale, right? Like, there's a good scale and I guess a violent scale, I would say. And there's, you know, Tango, who's like the first banished for speaking truth. They canceled him. They canceled him for speaking truth. You know, the king's vassal, incredibly loyal vassal. And of course, Saburo, I think, would be on the top of this, you know, this diagram or something, if you were making one, where he's loyal to his father, but like, no, he's not the most good character. And then kind of, you know, they have the fool, and then they have, yeah, I think Sue is probably the purest out of all of the characters.
Right. Oh, I mean, I think about the fool's loyalty, which is interesting, right? Because the fool, I mean, in some ways, the fool speaking truth actually does trigger something that accelerates Taro's Taro's ability to kind of outfox his dad, and also gives Lady Kata a way in. And that's when, you know, the warlords are doing their thing, and the fool's mocking them. He takes it, Taro takes it as this fool is mocking Taro. He's actually mocking Heidi Tora.
Yeah, Heidi Tora.
But Heidi Tora, as one of the sub warlords, goes to just, you know, axe this guy with his sword. Heidi Tora offs him, like, from, like, you know, with an arrow from the tower, just out, and that is the context, you know, that gives him the pretext for being able to cut him out. Because what are you doing, you know, taking out my warlords? You're no longer the head of the clan. You've given that to me.
It's an incredibly like Godfather-esque, or like almost Sopranos-esque scene, right? Like, with you know, all of a sudden someone's been given power at the top of this, you know, empire, and they're like, well, you don't really fit into this situation anymore. You're not giving me my due respect. Like, you know, it doesn't work with two people kind of sharing power. You need to defer to me. And of course, that has a different context completely when it's father and son in like a Confucian, you know, sense. But like, it does feel a lot like that, right? Like, you've given up power to your son, you've deferred to him, and then he's like, listen, this is my territory, and you're impinging on it. Like, you can't really share, you can't take the banner. And the banner is a very interesting symbol of that, right? Like, he's like, oh, I'm going to keep my banner, I'm going to keep my title, but I'm going to defer the actual power to my son. But then how do you really think about that, right? Like, is power itself is kind of a symbolic thing that only really works if you're using violence, like the violence of the territory, the violence of your own army, to enforce it. Like, it doesn't really work if you're like, oh, I'm handing off this symbolic part of it, but I'm going to keep this, and I'm going to keep my like flag, and this is the flag everybody kind of knows within this entire territory, but I'm going to keep that, and he gets the power. Like, you give away 100% of power, or you give away no power. Like, there isn't really a middle ground.
Right. So, but we also, I mean, this is where we also see Lady Kata really come in, and Lady Kata is interesting. I mean, like, even in the way she's made up, she's both made to look like kind of an Oni. I think that's what these little marks are doing up here. From like,
but it was also the fashion too. If you remember, like back then, like the hottest thing in Japan back then was like shaved eyebrows, painted up top in the middle of your forehead, and blackened teeth, and just like, ooh, bunny. That's just like what they were going for.
Yeah,
She would
but I
have
also
killed in Tokyo.
but
Yeah.
she also is made. She also specifically given Noah traits related to a fox, or no theater traits related to a fox, which is also that's pretty highly symbolic. I mean, and she is like, when you see of the female characters, and there's not that many in this movie, but of the female characters, she's the only one made up that way. Like, so I mean, and also she acts in like a very high pitched voice. She's really, and I think if we were
Overacts, right? Like
yeah,
that's the yeah.
specifically, and that actress is actually doesn't always act like that. That's specific to this movie. So it's meant to stand out. It's also she's given, like I said, she acts in a no theater characteristics. Like, I don't really know. When I first saw this movie 20 years ago, I didn't get it. But that element of it, I was like, what? Like, why is she acting so weird? What's with, like, how's her voice that shrill? Like, what's going on here? And she and Hitodora are given, like, Hitodora, as particularly as he goes crazy, or like totally in exaggerated makeup. And I also used to think that was like bad makeup, but then you look at everyone else in the film and no one else is like that. Like,
it's kind of almost, I mean, I hate using the term in this context, but like, it's almost zombie makeup. You know what I mean? Like the kind of makeup of a person who's seen like their own death and is living kind of in this afterlife. Like, it's makeup kind of in that context. Like, he's,
and it's
gray.
that exaggerated hair too, that you know, and eyes and whatnot. You've seen like prints like of that of oh man, I'm doing great tonight remembering things. It's my favorite printmaker from Japan, and I just completely lost it. He did what is the 27 or 37 views of Mount Fuji, you know, the famous one with the wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you look at like some of his more warrior paintings, like the Elder Warriors looked like this figure, as well as like the fact that, yes, it also, you know, as it went on, he's almost looking like he was in a Romero film.
yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
He's green at the end of the movie. Like, he's literally green. I mean, when you like see him, when you're like watching him dig his own grave when his period of like utter madness after the hurricane.
Is it Hasuke Katsushika?
No, but he's great too.
I just looked up views of Mount Fuji.
Yeah, wait. Oh man, I've actually seen all of them in like at a show in DC a while ago.
All right, no, it's all right. I
feel embarrassed right now.
was trying to real time. Hiroshige, is that the? Does that ring any bells? I don't know.
Hokusai?
The chat.
Hokusai, there we go.
Thank you, chat. Specifically, Kagatio and Sean Moon.
Yeah, he's like the biggest one too. Like he's considered the godfather of manga.
Fuck yeah, chat. This is gonna be a very hard audio episode for Jason to have to edit, by the way. This is not.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna translate the same way.
So we have that, and I mean, I guess we're going all over the place, but I love that intro scene where you have the setup and the banishing, and then that feels very theatrical, even though it's in that big field, like every in a kind of Western theatrical sense. But
yeah, that's what I do with Movie Night Extravaganza too.
In a kind of Western theatrical sense. But by the time you get into the first castle, it's not like that at all. Like you have like the acting significantly changes with all, particularly with not when it's not Lady Kara Hitodora, everyone's acting more and more naturalistically. So, and it doesn't look staged. Like, it's not like, it doesn't look like they just put a stage play with all this formality in a field. It's very, very different.
And by the way, I should say, when we do the after stream, I mean, I assume you're sticking around for that, right, Varn? Because at an hour we go off this revolution, and we have an after stream that we do, and I am going to go through it scene by scene. I have graphics that I saved that I want Andy respond to. So we are going to do that part of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I
but
guess
anyway,
if we're
go on.
At
Yeah.
an hour, we don't have that much time left, so we should get to the rest of the movie. I mean, it's hard to talk about a 3 hour and 40-minute epic that involves about multiple contexts and several background things in an hour.
Yeah, well, that's why we do it in 2 parts. The same way I watched it.
I mean, do you guys find this to be like? There's a big argument of whether this movie is super pessimistic or not. I mean, the source material is kind of pessimistic, but also the title literally is chaos, and the ending sequences, which I guess we can talk more about later, are not sequences of hope. Like Sua disappears, Amitada Buddha just falls and goes away. The entire line is wiped out. Do you feel like this is like Kurosawa in despair, or do you think it's just the result of war? What do you think is going on there?
I mean, it feels like a thesis statement in some ways, like in Kurosawa's pacifism, right? Like he's making his mark on this, medieval, if you want to call it that, / samurai genre, where he's kind of making the statement, I think, throughout the entire thing, that war is pointless, that it leads to this betrayal, it leads to families literally getting ripped apart in this sense, right? It leads to generational trauma where each generation is unable to escape what the original genre or whatever the original family is really doing. So I think that and he does it in kind of an incredibly Greek, like someone mentioned in the chat, like Medea, like it does feel like that, like, right, like at the end of it, Kurogane has the thing where he literally says, or not Kurogane, Tango has a thing, he literally says, "Do not blaspheme. It's the gods who weep. They see us killing each other over and over since time began." And he says, "Men prefer sorrow over joy, suffering over peace. Look at them in the first castle. They celebrate murder." And it feels like he's kind of staking out this pacifistic position that he feels, right? Like war is pointless. Here is literally the most beautiful 3-hour film like that I've ever seen in my life. Like I don't think I've seen a film with this much beauty that really feels this artistic. The blood throughout it, although it's everywhere, is stylized. Like you don't feel like you're watching people necessarily murder each other in like a visceral sense, as much as you really feel like you're seeing this in an art form, right? Like you feel like you're watching a painting, really, like, or like a series of paintings. You know what I mean? Like it's beautiful.
Which is how the movie was actually put together, was with a series of paintings that took him 10 years to make.
And I have a clip for that when we go to our after party, I guess. But I think that I feel like he's making a statement on his own pacifism, and he wants to make it clear that within this 3-hour King Lear themed samurai epic, that he's really staking out this position that war is pointless. It happens constantly. It's generational. Like as long as we're in this, so it is pessimistic, I guess, in that sense, that you can't escape from it, right? Like you can't escape from it by just being honest and good, because obviously you kind of get shot off a horse at that point. He's kind of, but he wants to make that part of it clear. And I think that having these constant battles between family members really does stake out that position.
Right. Well, there's the other theological context is actually the wrong word for it, but I don't have a better one in English. Dharmic context is that in this time period in Japan, the versions of Buddhism that were most popular, Shin, Nichiren, etc., believed that the world was in an age of degenerate dharma, that the Buddha passed from the world, but also the dharma had passed from the world, and that they were the best you could do was maybe go to one of the Buddhist heavens for a while in a Pure Land and kind of bide your time until Maitreya Buddha came back. And what I find interesting is that Hidodora kind of uses that as an excuse to be nihilistic early on when the first debates, like after he gets kicked out of Toro's castle. And he, when Tango comes after him and talks about Lord Buddha, he throws back the age of degenerate Dharma stuff, but it's an excuse for him not to have dealt with his own prior actions. And I think that's interesting because the themes come throughout. And if you think about when this is made, there's some people in chat pointed this out too. This is made in 1985. Japan is like we're afraid of Japan in America in 1985.
Yeah. And 1985, if I'm not mistaken, is the year that Trump went on Oprah and said, Japan is far outpacing us. They are manufacturing more than we could ever think of.
Yeah, it's like when
the ad attacking Reagan's presidency, saying that he's let Japan further overtake.
Right, Michael
right around
Crichton
the time Gun Ho came out.
Right, and Michael Crichton starts writing like Rising Sun, which is that super racist thing got turned into a movie in the 90s, but like is really about the mid 80s. And so, but I think it's pretty clear to some people in Japan that this is all going to kind of at least stagnate, if not just stop. And so that seems to be some context for this. So that's what I got. I find this movie like very bleak. I've read some interpretations
it's
where
also
like
the same year that Mishima came out, which makes it a very fascinating movie to talk to back to back.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. I mean,
yeah.
Although Mishima is a Westerner writing about a
100%. I just it's just interesting to have talked about those movies back to back. I mean, that is 100% a Westerner's take on it, but they still did feel embarrassed about the fact that had even happened in Japan.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I mean the guy like basically. I
didn't mean to cite noted scholar Trump, by the way. I just I wrote a whole essay about that in college, and I just remember that it was the same year.
But it does seem like there's a lot of that going on. I mean, I also think Kurosawa was not super optimistic about the state of the world by 1985. And like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like he might have had good reasons to not be optimistic now in retrospect.
Yeah.
But
you have the Soviet Union kind of collapsing by that point. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of been understood.
A little early, but
no, but I mean, like, it's starting to. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, we didn't quite realize it at the time. I don't think but like you could see the beginnings of it throughout the 80s. But it wasn't until the end of the 80s where it really was in full effect. And
89 is when it really collapsed. But I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at it from an outside perspective, right? Like you kind of see the only system that's not this kind of relentless drive towards capitalism, relentless drive towards kind of draining everything kind of away, this competition that only happens in the sphere of economics. Like you kind of see that starting to fall away, and it does feel like you're kind of rushing towards this end of history moment that obviously was embarrassingly wrong, but like, I can see how you would be looking at kind of the world from the outside at that point and be like, no, the world's going towards a fucking horrible place. Like there's no coming back from this spot either. Like it's and that's how South Park was invented. But yeah, I'm just saying, like, I don't think things necessarily feel optimistic at that point. And I'm not trying to say that it wasn't a pessimistic film. It definitely is. I just think that it's kind of interestingly staking out this position, right? Like this feeling that like war itself, which is something that we've undergone. I mean, the entire world has undergone nonstop, like for the last century, right? Like,
and I remember when I was in elementary school in 1988, and people were like, "Well, maybe Vietnam will be the last war." I mean, like seriously. I mean, this was American grade school propaganda in '88. I mean, and also ignoring that like the Falklands Island and Grenada happened, but like, it is interesting that that's still in the U.S. horizon, and in Japan, there haven't been a war. I mean, they have not. But it does seem like there's a sense that you know, the old, more brutal way is definitely coming back.
Yeah. By the way, I pronounced it wrong, and I said Mishima instead of Mishima. And thank you for pointing that out, chat. I feel great about myself.
Yeah, enunciation always goes on the third syllable.
I will butcher everything ever said in another language, and most things said in English. So
yeah, well, I get shit on Movie Night Extravaganza for it. Fucking.
I mean, you deserve it, but you know, you just embrace it. You'll never say anything correctly like I do, and you'll be fine.
All right.
Like, butcher English, and it'll help. Like
I do on a regular basis.
Have John Barber on more so you can really feel it.
We're getting towards an hour, so I probably should cut it here and say that we're going to be doing an after show on both YouTube and Twitch on Movie Night Extravaganza. I want to continue this conversation for sure. I just think that, you know, in the 7 minutes, we're not going to get to a point where it kind of stalls out, because I am going to go through this. I'm going to go through it like scene by scene, I think, within this context. Now, once I get control of the production. So I will say thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Movie Night Extravaganza Invades This Is Revolution, since we used that intro. You know, follow both of us. I mean, whatever one you're watching on, follow the other one, Movie Night Extravaganza or This Is Revolution. Like and subscribe, hit the bell, whatever they're saying, you know, now out there. You know, Movie Night Extravaganza has a Patreon, patreon.com/Movie Night Extra, I believe. It's in the show notes, though, if it's not, if I didn't get that completely right, because they're flipped. But we will be going live again in about 5 minutes after this. So thank you so much for joining us.